Before we begin tonight's journey, let me ask you something gentle. Where are you listening from? What country and what time is it right now for you? If you'd like, share it in the comments below. I love to see where these stories drift, from one coast to another, across oceans and time zones. And while you're here, may I tell you a small secret? Only about 10% of those who listen are subscribed. If you find peace in these stories, if you enjoy being carried into dreams by history, I kindly invite you to subscribe and to like this video. Not only does it support me, but it also helps other dreamers discover this calm space. Now settle in, take a deep breath. The story we are about to share begins in a place that no longer exists on any map. A land hidden beneath the gray waves of the North Sea. Doggerland. Imagine, if you will, a vast plain stretching where the sea now rolls. Grasslands and rivers wound their way across valleys. Herds of red deer grazed, mammoths trudged slowly, and small groups of humans followed the paths of animals, fishing in rivers and hunting along marshes. It was a land of forests, meadows, and lakes, a bridge between Britain and the continent. But today, if you sail over the same space, you see only restless water. Beneath those waves, archaeologists find traces, bones of lions, tusks of mammoths, tools of flint, lost for thousands of years. It is a memory of a land drowned. Doggerland existed during the Mesolithic age, roughly 10,000 years ago, when the world was shifting from the long cold of the Ice Age into a warmer, greener time. As the glaciers melted, seas rose. Slowly, silently, the waters crept higher, cutting rivers into estuaries, turning hills into islands, and swallowing valleys whole. For the people who lived there, this was not an instant catastrophe, but a slow, steady transformation. A world they had known for generations was shrinking. Each season, shorelines changed. Each decade, villages had to move further inland. And one day, what was once a wide and fertile plain became only memory, stories told around firelight, fading as the tides advanced. Doggerland is sometimes called Europe's Atlantis, though in truth it was not a sudden sinking, but a long drowning. Still, like Atlantis, it captures our imagination, because to think of it is to realize how fragile our landscapes are, and how easily seas can take back what we think is permanent. Tonight, we will walk that hidden land together, in imagination, in story, and in calm reflection. We will meet the animals who roamed there, the people who fished its rivers, and we will watch the slow rising of the waters that erased it. So close your eyes now. Let the sound of the sea surround you. Feel the soft grass underfoot, though it lies now beneath the waves. Doggerland is gone, but in this hour, we will bring it to life again, gently, peacefully, as you drift toward rest. Chapter 1. The Land Before the Sea. Let us step back in time. Far back, beyond written history, beyond pyramids and palaces, into a Europe that few of us can imagine. The year is perhaps 10,000 BCE. The Ice Age is ending. Glaciers that once covered the north are melting. The air is still cool, but the land is greening. Rivers flow freely where before there was only frozen silence. And in the heart of this shifting landscape lies Doggerland. Picture it, a plain stretching from what we now call Britain across to Denmark, the Netherlands, and Germany. No English Channel divided island from continent. Instead, a person could walk on dry land, following rivers that wound across the open country. This land was not barren. It was alive. Birch and pine trees grew, giving way slowly to oak and hazel as the climate warmed. Grassy meadows rolled out between forest patches, dotted with wildflowers. Lakes mirrored the skies, and wetlands were rich with reeds and fish. Animals roamed in abundance. Red deer moved in graceful herds. Wild boar rooted noisily in the undergrowth. Enormous aurochs, the ancestors of our modern cattle, grazed along the riverbanks. And now and then the heavy tread of a mammoth or woolly rhinoceros pressed deep into the soft earth. Lions and bears prowled too, reminders that this was still a wild and untamed world. For humans, Doggerland was paradise. Hunters and gatherers followed the herds, set traps for smaller animals, and cast nets in rivers full of salmon. The coastlines teemed with shellfish. Berries, nuts, and roots provided variety to the diet. Life was hard, of course. Winters were cold, predators were near, and food was never guaranteed. But the land was generous, and people adapted. Imagine a small group of families setting up camp near a lake. The huts are simple, made of wooden poles, reeds, and hides. Smoke rises from a central fire, carrying the smell of roasted fish. Children laugh as they skip stones across the water. Adults prepare tools of flint, carefully shaping blades, scrapers, and points. These people had no writing, no cities, no kings, but they had memory. They carried with them a deep knowledge of the land, which plants healed wounds, which paths deer preferred, when salmon would run upriver. Knowledge was survival, and it was passed carefully from one generation to the next, in stories told by the firelight. We can imagine them gazing at the horizon, seeing herds of animals moving across the plain, and feeling the land itself as a trusted companion. For to them, Doggerland was not just land. It was home, abundant and alive. Archaeologists today find traces of this life hidden beneath the sea. Fishing trawlers drag up bones of mammoths and lions. Flint tools, once held by human hands, now rest on the sea floor. These artifacts are fragments of a lost world, tiny windows into lives lived millennia ago. The North Sea hides more than just water. It hides a memory. But nature is never still. Even as people thrived, the land was changing. The climate grew warmer, slowly but surely. Ice sheets melted further north, sending torrents of water into the oceans. Sea levels began to rise. What had been wide valleys became marshes. What had been solid plains turned into rivers and inlets. To the people living there, this must have been unsettling. A camp built by the shore might find itself flooded within a generation. Trails used by hunters were swallowed by encroaching marsh. Lakes widened, rivers changed course. Still, life continued. Humans are resourceful. They moved, they adapted, they learned new ways to fish, new places to camp. But the slow, steady loss of land could not be ignored. One day, Doggerland stretched across hundreds of miles. Then, it shrank to a smaller heartland, with Britain slowly becoming an island. By around 6000 BCE, the sea had taken so much that Doggerland existed only in fragments, low islands, marshy flats, isolated by the tide. And then, one day, it was gone, swallowed entirely, remembered only in bones and tools, and in the silence beneath the waves. As we pause here, imagine standing on that land in the time before the sea. The air is cool and fresh. You hear the low call of a stag in the forest, the splash of fish in the river, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Beneath your feet, firm earth stretches on, where now there is only restless water. Doggerland was a world between worlds, a bridge of life and connection, now hidden beneath the North Sea. And in our story, it is the beginning. Chapter 2. The People of Doggerland. Let us walk closer now, past the meadows and the rivers, beyond the herds of deer, into the circle of firelight, where the people of Doggerland gather. There are no kings here, no palaces, no temples carved in stone. Life is simpler, but no less meaningful. Families move with the seasons, following the rhythms of animals and plants. They are hunters, gatherers, and fishers, experts in survival, artists of adaptation. Morning begins with the fire rekindled. Smoke curls into the cool air, keeping insects away and hearts warm. Women prepare baskets of woven reeds, setting out to collect berries or roots. Men check their spears and bows, ready for a hunt. Children chase each other around the camp, learning through play, sometimes pretending their sticks are mighty spears. A little humor that reminds us children have always been children in every age. Their shelters are practical, frames of wood covered with animal hides and reeds. They are built to be taken down and moved because the people of Doggerland do not stay in one place forever. They follow the food, the seasons, the waters. Meals are modest but nourishing. Fish roasted on wooden stakes, nuts cracked open on flat stones, meat smoked to last through leaner days. Sometimes, a lucky hunt brings down a deer, enough to feed many families. Nothing is wasted. Hides become clothing, bones become tools, sinew becomes thread. The people are masters of flint. With careful strikes, they shape stone into sharp edges, knives, scrapers, arrowheads. Archaeologists today still find these tiny blades, microliths, no bigger than a thumb, but once vital to survival. Wood and bone are shaped into handles, harpoons, and needles. Baskets are woven, nets are tied. Every item is both practical and beautiful in its simplicity. Fire is sacred not just for warmth and cooking, but for hardening wooden tips, for keeping predators away, and for holding community together. In the evenings, the people gather around the fire. Stories are told. Stories of the hunt, of ancestors, of the spirits of animals. Laughter rises as well. Someone imitates the clumsy trot of a boar, or tells of how a fisherman once fell into the river trying to catch a salmon too large for his net. Even here, in the Mesolithic, humor keeps spirits light. Children listen wide-eyed, learning the lessons hidden in tales. Respect the deer, for they are swift and strong. Respect the rivers, for they give life but can take it too. Respect the fire, for it is both friend and danger. We cannot know their prayers in detail, but we can guess. They must have looked at the rising sun, the phases of the moon, the turning of the seasons, and wondered at the powers that moved the world. Perhaps they believed the spirits of animals walked with them. Perhaps rivers were seen as living beings, forests as sacred, stones as keepers of memory. Burials discovered from this time show care. Bodies placed with red ochre, with tools, with ornaments of bone or shell. Death was not an end, but a passage, a journey beyond. In this, they were like us, seeking meaning, seeking hope. Doggerland was not empty. Across its plains and rivers, groups met, sometimes peacefully, sharing food or exchanging tools, sometimes not so peacefully, for territory and resources always matter. A meeting could be a feast or a warning. But these meetings also meant stories spread, techniques improved, and knowledge passed along. One family might learn of a better way to trap fish. Another might discover new plants for healing. In this way, the people of Doggerland were connected, not by roads or cities, but by memory and movement. Imagine this: a hunter proudly returns with a rabbit, holding it up as if it were a mighty stag. His friends chuckle softly and the children giggle, but the meal is welcomed all the same. Or a fisherman slips, landing in the mud, to the laughter of his companions. Even in survival, people found ways to smile. Life was difficult, yes, but not without joy. Today, when the sea gives up its treasures, we see fragments of their world. A carved antler harpoon, smooth from use. A polished amber bead, once worn proudly. Footprints, preserved in clay, where a family once walked together across the wet ground. These traces tell us the people of Doggerland were not faceless shadows. They were individuals, with laughter, with love, with fear, with hope. So picture it now. The glow of fire in the twilight, the smell of roasted fish, the sound of a baby crying, soothed by a mother's soft song, hunters sharpening their tools for tomorrow's journey, elders telling stories of times even older. This was the heartbeat of Doggerland, human, fragile, enduring. And as the night falls over their camp, the stars shine above, the same stars we see tonight. They looked up, as we do, wondering what lay beyond. Chapter 3. Animals and Nature of Doggerland. Close your eyes and imagine the world of Doggerland, not from the hearth of a human camp, but from the whispering fields and forests themselves. For long before people shaped flint or cast nets, the land belonged to animals. And even when humans arrived, they lived as part of this great living web. Across wide grassy plains, herds of red deer moved like living rivers, their antlers rising above the mist. In autumn, the stags bellowed deep and loud, their voices rolling over the land like thunder. It was both a call of power and a reminder of the endless cycle of life. Wild horses galloped freely, their hooves drumming the earth. Aurochs, giant muscular cattle with horns sweeping like crescents, grazed near rivers, powerful and dangerous. To hunt one was both risky and rewarding, for such a beast could feed many mouths and provide hides, bones, and sinew for countless tools. And then, in colder patches of the land, still lingering from the Ice Age, moved the mammoth. Towering, shaggy, tusks curling outward like ivory sabers. Slow, steady, patient giants who shaped the land as they moved. To the people of Doggerland, such creatures must have seemed like walking legends. But where there are herds, there are hunters. Wolves padded silently along tree lines, their amber eyes watching, waiting for weakness. Lions, yes, lions, prowled in the northern forests then, strong and swift, though perhaps smaller than those of Africa today. Bears lumbered through the undergrowth, hungry for berries, fish, or unlucky prey. Even hyenas lingered in Europe then, scavenging and laughing in the night. Imagine sitting by the fire and hearing their eerie calls echoing across the dark plain. Unsettling, but a reminder that humans were not the only clever survivors. Above, the skies were alive. Migrating birds passed in great V-shaped flocks, tracing paths as ancient as the rivers. Swans glided gracefully over lakes, Ducks and geese nested in reed beds. Along the coast, gulls and terns wheeled and cried, while cormorants dove into the sea with a splash, vanishing into the depths. Birds were more than food. They were signs. The people of Doggerland could read their patterns to know when seasons shifted, when fish gathered, when storms approached. The heart of Doggerland was its waters. Rivers cut deep channels, feeding wide lakes that reflected the sky. Marshes stretched out, buzzing with insects, filled with reeds that whispered in the wind. These wetlands were treasure troves, fish darting beneath the surface, eels wriggling in the mud, shellfish hidden in shallow pools. Beavers gnawed at trees, shaping waterways with their dams. Otters slipped playfully through the currents. For humans, these waters were pantries and highways. But for the animals, they were homes, woven into the balance of survival. Forests grew thicker in warmer times. Birch, pine, oak, and hazel spread their branches, providing shade, wood, and nuts. Hazelnuts, especially, were vital to humans. Small, easy to store, and full of energy. Even today, archaeologists find ancient pits filled with burnt hazelnut shells, evidence of feasts long past. Plants were medicine as well as food, leaves to heal wounds, roots to ease hunger, berries to brighten diets. Some plants carried danger too, for not every berry is kind. Knowledge of what to eat, what to avoid, and what to use in healing was passed carefully through generations. Life in Doggerland moved to the rhythm of seasons. Spring, rivers swelled with meltwater, fish surged upstream, birds nested, new shoots of green covered the land. Summer, warmth filled the plains, berries ripened, herds grew strong, people and animals thrived. Autumn. The air grew crisp, deer locked antlers in battle, nuts and roots were gathered in haste. Fires burned long into the night. Winter. Cold winds swept across, food grew scarce, and survival was a test of memory, preparation, and luck. Every creature, human or beast, played its part in this cycle. Though abundant, Doggerland was never easy. A sudden storm could sweep across the flat plains. A hungry predator could turn the hunter into the hunted. And beneath it all, the slow, silent rise of water continued, year by year. The animals themselves told of these changes. Marsh birds moved further inland. Fish shifted their routes. Herds migrated differently. To people paying attention, nature's whispers were warnings. Today, when fishermen drag their nets across the Dogger Bank, a shallow rise in the North Sea, they sometimes bring up bones. A mammoth's tusk, yellowed by time, a deer antler, still sharp at the tips, even lion bones, strange and unexpected from the cold waters. Each fragment is a ghost of the animals that once roamed here. A reminder that the sea we know was once a plain, alive with movement and sound. So picture yourself there, standing at dawn, the mist rising from a wide river. You hear the heavy steps of an aurochs, the splash of a fish, the cry of geese overhead. The forest stirs with life, every sound a reminder that you are not alone. This was Doggerland, not just a bridge of land, but a bridge of life, a place where humans walked among giants, where survival meant listening carefully to the voices of nature. And as the sun rises over this lost world, you walk with them, quietly, gently, into the day. Chapter 4. The Drowning of Doggerland. For thousands of years, Doggerland thrived. Rivers ran, forests grew, herds moved, and people lived their quiet cycles of hunting, gathering, and storytelling. But the land itself was never still. Beneath the soil and stone, the earth was shifting. Around it, the ice sheets that once covered much of Europe were retreating, melting into rivers and seas. And slowly, almost too slowly to notice at first, the waters began to rise. At first, it may have seemed like nothing. A stream a little deeper than last year, a marsh where once there had been dry ground, a shoreline creeping closer to the camp. The people of Doggerland were skilled observers. They noticed when birds flew differently, when fish gathered in unusual places. Surely they noticed the sea's quiet approach as well. A favorite hunting ground turned to swamp. A path once dry, now muddy with every tide. One family might have laughed lightly. "The land is thirsty, drinking the sea," a father might say, trying to make his children smile. But beneath the humor was unease. For this was no ordinary flood. Far to the north, glaciers were shrinking. Vast mountains of ice, older than memory, dripped and cracked into rivers. All that water had to go somewhere, and it poured into the oceans. Geologists today tell us that seas rose meter by meter, year by year, like a patient hand pressing down. For people then, it must have seemed as if the world itself were changing shape. Fields became marshes. Marshes became lakes. Lakes opened into wide estuaries where the sea came surging in with the tides. Imagine a family returning to their camp after a season away, only to find their shelters washed out, reeds swaying where fire once burned. They would gather their things, sigh, and move inland. Perhaps someone joked, "The fish have stolen our beds," a smile in the face of loss. But they knew. The sea was coming. It was not always slow. Around 8,000 years ago, a cataclysm struck. Far off in the lands we now call Norway, an undersea slope collapsed in what scientists call the Storegga Slide. It sent a tsunami surging across the North Sea. For Doggerland, this wave was devastation. Camps swept away, families scattered, lives ended in a heartbeat. It was a reminder that while the sea could rise slowly, it could also roar with sudden fury. Those who survived would tell stories of the great wave. Children might whisper them by the fire, warnings to never build too close to the shifting waters. With every generation, Doggerland grew smaller. What once stretched like a continent became an islanded land. Lakes merged with the sea, coastlines cut deeper, paths disappeared. Imagine walking with your people and finding yourself on a narrowing strip of earth, the water pressing in from both sides. To the east, the Baltic. To the west, the Atlantic. And between them, the slow drowning of home. The Dogger Hills became isolated ridges, low valleys filled with brackish tides. The great plains that once echoed with deer calls grew silent beneath the waves. The people did not simply give up. They moved, they adapted. Camps shifted inland. New fishing grounds were discovered. Canoes carried them across the widening waters. But each move carried grief. Graves were left behind. Stories tied to certain hills and rivers became memories. Perhaps they comforted themselves with humor again. The sea likes our company. It follows us everywhere. But they knew the truth. The land was dying. Today, divers and fishermen still bring up pieces of that world. Antlers, harpoons, bones, not from the sea, but from a land now hidden beneath it. One can imagine whole forests lying silent beneath the waves, their trunks dark and waterlogged, their branches still stretching upward as if asking for air. Doggerland is not gone. It is simply drowned. For the people who lived through it, the drowning of Doggerland must have been more than a physical change. It was the loss of identity, of belonging. Their maps of memory, where to find berries, where to fish, where to bury the dead, all rewritten by the water. And so they carried their stories with them, inland and across Europe, into the islands that remained. They became the ancestors of new peoples, their lives layered into ours. Picture the last days, a small group of families standing on a high ridge, watching the tide roll in. They can see waves covering the plains where their grandparents once hunted. They know they cannot stay. The fire crackles low. The children clutch tools and baskets. The elders look out to the horizon. The sea whispers closer with every breath. And then, quietly, they turn away. They walk inland, leaving behind a land that would be forgotten, until thousands of years later we would rediscover it, not as a home, but as a ghost beneath the sea. Chapter 5. Archaeology and Rediscovery. For thousands of years, Doggerland lay hidden beneath the waves, silent and unseen. Storms rolled across the North Sea, ships passed overhead, and nets dragged across the seabed. But beneath it all, the ancient plains slept. The people who once lived there were gone, their stories lost, or so it seemed. The rediscovery of Doggerland began not with scholars in libraries, but with fishermen. In the 20th century, men hauling nets over the shallow Dogger Bank began pulling up strange things, not just fish, but bones, massive, heavy, time-worn bones. At first, many thought they were whale bones, natural enough in the sea, but soon it became clear. These were land animals. Red deer antlers, aurochs horns, even mammoth tusks. Imagine the surprise of a fisherman expecting cod, but finding the curved ivory of a creature extinct for thousands of years. Some kept them as curiosities, some sold them, and some wondered, how could land animals leave their bones at the bottom of the sea? Archaeologists began to pay attention. The North Sea, they realized, had not always been sea. The shallow shelf hinted at something greater. The bones, stone tools, and traces of peat suggested a lost world. The name Doggerland was coined after the Dogger Bank, itself named for Dutch fishing boats called doggers. Slowly, a picture formed. A Mesolithic landscape once filled with life, drowned when the seas rose. Beyond bones, there were stranger finds. Peat, that dark, spongy plant matter that forms in marshes, turned up from the seabed, proof of ancient wetlands. Stone tools, too, chipped flints shaped by human hands, arrowheads, scrapers, even fragments of harpoons. Each tool told a story, of a hunter kneeling by a fire, chipping carefully, of a fisher standing by a river, setting a trap, of people who lived not so differently from us, though their world was rawer, closer to nature. With sonar, scientists began mapping the seabed. To most of us, the North Sea looks flat and featureless, but beneath the waves, ridges, valleys, and channels stretch out, preserved like ghostly fingerprints of the land that once was. Computer models painted pictures, rivers flowing where fish now swim, hills rising where only waves break, lakes reflecting skies long gone. Suddenly, Doggerland was no longer myth. It was a place, tangible, real, charted. And then, among the bones and tools, came something more human. Fragments of skulls, teeth, pieces of people. It was proof that this was not just an animal pasture, not just a hunting ground. It had been a home. Families had lived here, laughed here, mourned here. Their remains, carried by the sea, came back to us in fragments. One tooth might not seem much, but to an archaeologist, it is everything. Diet, health, even DNA. Through such fragments, the dead of Doggerland whisper again. Doggerland is now studied by an entire field of research, marine archaeology. Divers, sonar scans, sediment cores, all used to piece together the puzzle. From pollen preserved in ancient mud, we know what plants once grew. From animal bones, we know what beasts roamed. From stone tools, we see human ingenuity. It is like building a tapestry from threads dragged up by accident. And though the work is slow, every discovery makes the picture sharper. Doggerland was not just a strip of land, but a thriving heart of Europe's Mesolithic world. Even today, much of what we know comes from fishermen. Trawlers crossing the Dogger Bank still pull up bones and artifacts. Some are given to museums, some kept on mantelpieces, some lost again. One might imagine a fisherman holding a piece of mammoth tusk, laughing as he says, "This one's too big for the frying pan." A little humor, yes, but also awe. For every find is a reminder that the sea hides more than fish. Once the idea of Doggerland took hold, it spread beyond archaeology. Writers imagined it as a prehistoric Eden. Artists painted it as a place of mammoths and hunters, glowing fires under endless skies. And in a way, it was Eden, a land of abundance, drowned by forces beyond human control. A reminder that the world shifts, and no home is forever. The work is far from over. New surveys, new dredging projects, even wind farms in the North Sea uncover more evidence. Each bone, each shard, is another sentence in the story. Doggerland is no longer forgotten. Piece by piece it rises again, not from the waves, but from our imagination, guided by science. Picture a fisherman at dawn, standing on the deck of his boat. The nets come up heavy. Among the flapping fish lies something else, a fragment of antler, polished smooth by thousands of years in the sea. He holds it up, frowning, then smiling. In that moment, the past and present touch. The man of today holds the relic of a man or a beast of yesterday. The land beneath the waves speaks again. Doggerland may be drowned, but it is not silent. Chapter 6. Life in Doggerland. Reimagined. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. You are standing not on a boat in the North Sea, but on solid earth. The waves are far away, hidden beyond forests and rivers. It is 8,000 years ago, and the land beneath your feet is Doggerland. A small camp rests by the edge of a broad river. Huts shaped from bent branches and hides stand in a loose circle. Smoke curls from a hearth at the center where embers glow orange. Children chase one another around the camp, their laughter mixing with the crackle of fire. Women squat near baskets, weaving reeds into tighter patterns. Men return from the river, their arms glistening with water, each carrying fish skewered on sharpened sticks. This is no great city. There are none in the world yet. But here, in this village, life is full, steady, and human. Scattered near the fire are tools, flint blades, polished by use, scrapers for hides, bone needles for sewing, antler picks for digging. Each tells a story of work done with patience. A man squats with a flint core, striking carefully to create sharp flakes. His child watches, wide-eyed, learning the craft that will one day be his inheritance. The sound, sharp, rhythmic, rings out like the heartbeat of Doggerland. Nearby, a woman strings bonefish hooks onto a cord. She hums softly as she works, the tune passed down from her mother. Practical and beautiful, her work ensures the camp will eat. Meals in Doggerland are simple but rich. Fish roasted over the fire, berries crushed into pastes, nuts cracked open with stones, sometimes a great prize. Red deer, its meat shared among families. The fire is always alive. By day it warms and cooks. By night it keeps away the darkness, and perhaps the wolves. The people gather around it telling stories. Some are practical, where to hunt, how to read the river. Others are playful, tales of trickster animals, of spirits in the forest. Even then, people laughed. Imagine one hunter teasing another. You caught a fish so small even the cat wouldn't eat it. A little humor keeps the long nights easier. We do not know the exact beliefs of Doggerland's people, but archaeologists suggest they saw the world as alive with spirit. Every tree, every animal, every river carried power. Perhaps when they speared a fish, they whispered a thank you. Perhaps when lightning cracked the sky, they told their children it was the anger of unseen beings. One can imagine a shaman sitting quietly, antler headdress upon his brow, painted with ochre. He listens to the wind, interprets the dreams of the tribe, guides them with both wisdom and mystery. The camp is never truly silent. Listen, the rush of the river, the wing beats of geese overhead, the clatter of tools on stone, the murmur of mothers singing, the occasional bark of a dog, one of the first domesticated companions. All of it weaves together into a rhythm, steady as a lullaby. Life in Doggerland turns with the seasons. In summer, fish are plentiful, berries hang heavy. In autumn, nuts are gathered, meat dried and stored. In winter, life slows. People huddle in huts, telling long stories, repairing tools, keeping fire alive. Spring brings new hope. Geese return. Rivers swell with fish. Forests burst green. The cycle begins again. Their clothes are simple but functional. Hides stitched with bone needles, furs draped against the cold. But beauty matters too. Shell beads, amber pendants, animal teeth strung into necklaces. One young girl laughs as she holds up a necklace too large for her, pretending she is a great leader. The adults smile. Even in the Mesolithic, children played at being important. Families are bound by kinship. Elders sit by the fire, their hair streaked with gray, their voices heavy with memory. They tell of hunts long past, of floods that reshaped rivers, of ancestors buried beneath the earth. Children listen wide-eyed, not just to stories, but to instructions for survival. Knowledge is passed in words, gestures, laughter, and song. In this way, Doggerland lives in each generation. Life is not easy. Cold bites, hunger gnaws, storms lash. But humans survive by resilience, and by humor. Perhaps when the fire smoked too much, someone coughed and joked, "Even the gods don't want to smell this fish." A ripple of laughter in the camp. Even then, people knew that smiles made survival easier. The people of Doggerland live lightly upon their land. They take fish and game, but they also respect the cycles. They know where deer cross, where fish spawn, where berries ripen. They follow these rhythms like a song. For them, the world is not divided into nature and human. It is one. They are part of it as much as the oak, the river, or the heron. Picture it once more. Dusk in Doggerland. The fire glows low. Children curl against their parents, wrapped in furs. The river whispers nearby. Stars prick the sky, guiding those who will travel tomorrow. A mother hums softly, a lullaby older than memory. A father stirs the fire one last time, sparks drifting like fireflies. Around them, the land is alive, rich, green, full of promise. Doggerland is not gone yet. For them, it is still home. And in your imagination, you can walk its paths tonight, hearing the echoes of lives long past. Chapter 7. The Myths, Stories, and Symbols of Doggerland. As darkness fell across Doggerland, the people gathered around the fire. Flames crackled, sparks drifted upward, and the world outside the circle of light seemed alive with mystery. It was in these hours that myths were born, woven from whispers of wind, shadows in the forest, and dreams that felt too powerful to be ignored. For the people of Doggerland, myths were not entertainment in the way we think of them today. They were memory, teaching, comfort, and explanation all at once. Why did the river swell suddenly? A spirit stirred beneath the water. Why did the deer disappear from their paths? A guardian animal had grown angry. Why did the sun return each morning? Because someone carried it across the sky. These stories were threads that bound life together, giving meaning to mystery. Archaeological clues, carvings, ochre markings, decorated bones, hint that Doggerland's people honored both the earth and the sky. They may have believed rivers had guardians, ancient beings who demanded respect before fish could be taken. They may have thought trees listened, their roots reaching into unseen worlds. And the stars? They were not distant suns, but eyes of ancestors, watching, guiding. When hunters set out, perhaps they whispered to the stars, "Show us the way, keep us safe." Every culture has tricksters, playful beings who cause trouble but also teach lessons. Imagine around the fire, a storyteller grinning as he described the fox, sly and cunning, who stole fish from a careless hunter. Children giggled, parents smiled, and the lesson was clear: pay attention or lose your meal. Humor was woven into myth, softening the sharpness of survival. A story could make people laugh, even as it reminded them of the rules of life. Some artifacts found in the North Sea suggest patterns scratched into bone, or shapes carved into antler. Were these decorations only for beauty? Or were they symbols, marks of meaning, carrying stories? Perhaps a spiral was not just a design, but the path of the sun. Perhaps a zigzag meant water, reminding the people that life flows and changes. Each mark could be a whisper from one generation to the next. One myth almost certainly grew stronger as centuries passed. The story of rising water, Families told tales of ancestors who once lived further out, where the sea now rolled. They spoke of villages swallowed by water, of forests lost beneath the waves. For us, it is geology. For them, it was memory, retold as warning. A storyteller might lean close to the children and whisper, "Never anger the sea. It always comes back to claim what is its own." And the children shivered, half afraid, half thrilled. Fire itself was central to myth. Who gave fire to humans? Was it stolen from a spirit, a gift from the sky? Or had it always been hidden in wood and stone, waiting to be discovered? Around the flames, the first philosophers of Doggerland debated, though perhaps not in long speeches, but in tales. One man swore a bird had brought fire. Another insisted a hunter had found it when lightning struck a tree. The truth did not matter. The story did. Without written language, dreams carried special weight. If someone dreamed of an ancestor, it was not simply imagination. It was a visit. A woman might wake and say, "My grandmother came to me last night. She says we must move to new ground," and the family might listen, because dreams were bridges to the unseen. In this way, decisions, even migrations, could be guided by the hidden wisdom of sleep. Imagine a ceremony in Doggerland. The shaman paints his face with red ochre, slips an antler crown over his head. Around the fire, people chant softly, stamping their feet. This is not mere performance. It is a way to connect with forces larger than themselves. By wearing the horns of a stag, the shaman becomes the stag speaking its spirit. By chanting, the people's voices weave into one, lifting their plea to the unseen. And for a moment, in the flicker of firelight, it feels real. Hunting was central, so myths grew around animals. Perhaps the deer was not just food, but a sacred being that allowed itself to be taken. Perhaps the mammoth, remembered from tales of grandparents, if not seen by younger generations, was spoken of as a giant spirit of the land. One child asked, "Why do we hunt?" And the elder answered, "Because the animals choose to give themselves. We honor them by eating, by using every part, by remembering them in stories." Not every story was solemn. Some were silly, meant to make the children laugh before sleep. A tale of a crow who thought himself wise, but dropped his fish into the river. A frog who tried to roar like a bear, only to croak and fall over. The adults chuckled, the children laughed loudly, and in that laughter lay relief. A reminder that life, even in hardship, held joy. When people finally buried their dead, they sometimes placed objects beside them, tools, beads, carved bones. To us, they are artifacts. To them, they were guides, reminders of who the person had been and what they might need in the world beyond. Each burial was itself a story, written not in words but in offerings. A necklace spoke of love. A spear spoke of skill. A shell bead spoke of journeys taken. As the fire burned low, the storyteller's voice grew softer. Children's eyes fluttered. The night air cooled. The last story of the evening might be simple, of how the stars were once campfires, lit by ancestors in the sky. "When you look up," the elder whispered, "you see them. They are never far." And with that thought, the camp slept, cradled in myth, surrounded by symbols, safe beneath stars that seemed eternal. Doggerland's stories may be lost to history, but in imagination they live again, as warm, as human, as timeless as the fire that first gave them voice. Chapter 8. The Drowning of Doggerland. Imagine you are standing on a grassy plain, watching the horizon. At first, it seems nothing changes. The same rivers flow, the same forests stand. But then, over years, decades, centuries, the waters creep closer. Quiet, steady, relentless. This is how Doggerland was lost. Around 8,000 years ago, the climate was warming. The last ice age had ended, glaciers melted, and the seas rose higher and higher. For people living in Doggerland, the change was slow, almost invisible in a single lifetime. A child was born by a riverbank. By the time he was old, that riverbank had shifted. Floods claimed more land. Families moved inland. His grandchildren might never see the fields he once hunted on. To them, it was not climate change. It was simply life, the world itself shifting, as it always did. As the ice melted in the north, rivers swelled with more water. Lakes grew deeper. Lowlands turned marshy. Camps that had once been safe became flooded. People learned to move their homes more often, following dry ground. They built huts on higher ridges, but even those ridges slowly gave way. Each spring, the floods grew stronger. Each autumn, the water stayed longer. And the people told stories to explain it. Some whispered that a great spirit stirred beneath the sea, reclaiming the land. Others thought the earth itself was sinking. Scientists today know that around 6,200 BCE, a massive event shook Doggerland, the Storegga Slide. Far off the coast of Norway, an underwater landslide sent giant waves racing across the North Sea. Imagine the people by the shore. One moment, the tide was low. The next, a wall of water rose roaring. Camps were swept away. Boats shattered. Families ran, carrying children, clutching tools. For survivors, it must have felt like the gods themselves had struck. That day would be told in stories for generations, the day the sea came running. Even after the great wave, the sea did not retreat. Year by year, tide by tide, it pressed further inland. Meadows where deer once grazed became salt marshes. Forests drowned, their trunks sinking into brackish water. Fish replaced the herds. Reed beds swallowed clearings. Families who once traveled freely across the land now found themselves separated by wide bays and inlets. Paths that had connected villages disappeared beneath waves. Slowly, Doggerland broke into islands. Faced with these changes, people adapted. Some built boats and learned to live more by fishing. Others left Doggerland entirely, moving into what we now call Britain, or across into continental Europe. For them, migration was not strange. It was survival. They followed rivers, followed animals, followed rumors of drier ground. But leaving meant letting go of old places, the hearth where ancestors had been buried, the familiar bend of a river, the sacred grove where stories were told. For every migration there was grief. The drowning of Doggerland may explain why so many later European myths include great floods. Long before written stories, people remembered through oral tradition. Perhaps a grandmother told her grandchildren, "Long ago there was more land, but the sea rose, and it took our homes." The children listened, wide-eyed, and passed the tale to their children in turn. Over time, memory became myth, and the myth traveled far, echoing in flood legends across the world. As the sea advanced, Doggerland became a place of edges. marshland replaced forest. Shorebirds nested where mammoths once roamed. The people fished more, hunted less. Archaeologists find fishhooks, harpoons, and paddles from this time, signs of change. The people were adapting, shifting from land to water, from hunters of red deer to fishers of the tides. But no matter how hard they tried, the sea always took more. By around 6000 BCE, Doggerland was no longer a wide land, but a shrinking archipelago of islands. Each storm swallowed more of it. Picture a last camp, perched on high ground, the sea on all sides. Elders remembered forests where now there was only water. Children knew only islands and tides. One night, as waves crashed nearby, an elder might have said, "Once we could walk to the far horizon." Now, the horizon comes to us. The children laughed, not understanding, but one day they too would tell the story, until there was no land left to tell it from. In time, the waves closed over everything. Rivers disappeared into the sea. Forests sank. Villages vanished. What had been home for thousands of years became seafloor. Doggerland was gone, but not forgotten. For generations, survivors carried its memory into new lands, into Britain, into Europe, into stories that lingered. Now, beneath the North Sea, fishermen sometimes pull up strange finds in their nets: bones of mammoths, antlers of deer, flint tools chipped by human hands. Each piece is a voice from the drowned land, a reminder that once, where the sea now rolls, people laughed, hunted, and sang. Imagine standing there on the last high ridge of Doggerland. Around you, the waves crash, the wind roars. You close your eyes, you hear the voices of children, the songs by the fire, the hum of life that once filled this land. And then, only the sea. Doggerland sinks beneath the waves, but in memory and in dreams, it still endures. Chapter 9. Rediscovery. The Science of Doggerland. For thousands of years, Doggerland lay hidden beneath the waves, silent and forgotten. The people who once called it home had long vanished, their descendants scattered across Europe. Only the sea remembered. Then, slowly, the drowned land began to reveal itself again, not through myth or memory, but through science. In the 20th century, North Sea fishermen began noticing strange finds in their nets. Instead of just cod or herring, they pulled up bones, not small fish bones, but enormous ones. Mammoth tusks, antlers of giant deer, even fragments of human tools. At first, many shrugged. The sea was full of mysteries. But as more and more finds came up, a pattern emerged. These were not recent bones. They were ancient, tens of thousands of years old. And they did not come from faraway lands. They came from the seabed right beneath the North Sea. Doggerland was waking up. Archaeologists gave the drowned plain a name, Doggerland, after the Dogger Bank, a shallow area of the North Sea used by fishermen for centuries. It was a fitting title. The Dogger Bank had always been generous with fish, and now it was generous with secrets. Scientists realized this was no mere sand bank. It was the remnant of a vast land bridge that had once connected Britain to Europe. What had been myth and speculation now took on form and scale. How do you study a land that no longer exists above water? The answer lies in patience, technology, and a bit of luck. Sonar mapping allows ships to see the seabed with sound waves, revealing ancient river valleys and coastlines buried beneath the sea. Core samples, long tubes of mud pulled from the seabed, preserve layers of pollen, seeds, and tiny shells. Each layer is a page in a book telling of forests, wetlands, and climates long past. Fishermen's finds add color to the story. A flint axe, polished smooth by hands 8,000 years gone. A carved bone, perhaps part of a ritual. The teeth of animals that no longer roam Europe. Piece by piece, the drowned world began to reassemble. With these tools, scientists built a picture of Doggerland as it once was. Vast rivers like the Schotten River carved paths across the land, flowing into what would one day be the North Sea. Marshes and lakes dotted the plains. Forests of birch and pine rolled across gentle hills. By combining data, researchers could even simulate what the land looked like at different times. Maps now showed Doggerland stretching like a green bridge, alive with rivers and valleys before it slowly shrank under rising seas. It was no longer just a theory. It was a place. Human artifacts confirmed what myth and logic had always suggested. Doggerland was not empty. People lived here. Flint tools show they hunted and butchered animals. Wooden paddles hint at boats. Fragments of woven nets suggest fishing. Each object, no matter how small, whispers of lives once lived. Hands striking sparks, voices calling across rivers, families gathered around fire. For archaeologists, every discovery is a window. Small, imperfect, but priceless. In recent years, technology has gone even further. Scientists can extract ancient DNA from soil and bones. From a fragment of soil dredged from the seabed, they can identify which animals walked there, which plants grew, even traces of the people themselves. It is almost as if Doggerland still breathes, leaving microscopic fingerprints behind. Why does Doggerland matter? Because it changes how we understand human history. For a long time, Britain was thought of as an isolated island culture. But Doggerland shows us it was once simply an extension of Europe. People moved freely across it. Ideas, tools, and traditions flowed along this land bridge. The flooding of Doggerland may even have shaped the British identity itself, turning islanders into seafarers, forced to adapt to the sea as barrier and highway. Scientists may speak in charts and data, but there is also wonder. Imagine being the diver who first held a flint blade that had been buried beneath the sea for 8,000 years. Or the researcher who brushed sand from a deer antler carved by hands that no longer exist. It is not just science. It is communion with the past. A handshake across millennia. Even today, Doggerland influences life. The North Sea above it is one of the busiest bodies of water in the world, filled with shipping lanes, oil rigs, and wind farms. Yet beneath all of that lies a drowned landscape, a ghost country. When ships pass, they sail above ancient rivers. When wind turbines spin, they stand where forests once grew. Life continues, layered upon life. Picture Doggerland not as a ruin, but as a bridge between times. Scientists dredge the seabed, divers explore, computers reconstruct maps. Each act revives a little more of the lost land. And perhaps, as you drift into sleep, you can imagine walking once more across that plain. The rivers whisper, the mammoths roam, the fires burn. And though the sea has taken it, in memory and in science, Doggerland rises again. Chapter 10. Closing Reflection. The Dream of Doggerland. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the sea, calm and endless. Beneath those gentle waves lies a memory, not of ships and harbors, but of forests, rivers, and people who lived their lives on land now drowned. This is Doggerland, a place that was real, a place that is gone, and yet a place that endures in story and science. Doggerland reminds us that the earth is never still. The world we know is not fixed. It shifts, it breathes, it changes. For the people who once lived there, this was simply life. The floods came, the tides rose, and they adapted. They did not know they were witnessing the end of a world. They only knew they must move, survive, carry their memories onward. And those memories linger, faint as whispers, in myths of floods and lands beneath the sea. Today, archaeologists, divers, and fishermen bring Doggerland back to us. A bone from a mammoth, a shard of flint, a grain of pollen preserved in seabed mud. Tiny fragments, yet together they weave a vast tapestry of life. Science becomes a form of remembering. Each sonar scan, each DNA test, is like brushing sand from an ancient carving, making the picture sharper, clearer. Doggerland lives again, not as a nation or a map, but as a story we can tell. There is a lesson in Doggerland's fate, one as soft as a tide. The world changes, and so must we. Lands appear and vanish. Peoples migrate, adapt, and endure. What matters most is not the ground beneath our feet, but the spirit we carry forward, the songs, the stories, the laughter, even the quiet resilience when things slip away. Doggerland shows us that even when a land is lost, it is not gone. It becomes part of us. So imagine, just before sleep, that you walk there once more. The air is cool, the grasses sway. In the distance you hear the calls of wild horses, the splash of fish in wide rivers, the murmur of a fire where families gather. You walk along the edge of a forest where red deer graze and children laugh. You see the stars reflected in clear water, the same stars navigators still follow across seas. And then, slowly, the waves roll in, not with violence, but with calm inevitability. The rivers merge into sea, the plains turn to silence. And yet, you feel no fear, for you know that Doggerland is safe now, resting beneath the tides, eternal in memory. As the last echoes fade, you lie down in the dream of Doggerland. The waves are steady, the air is still. You feel the gentle rhythm of the earth itself. The land is gone, but the story remains. And in stories, we find peace. So rest now. Let the drowned land cradle you in its memory. Sleep well and dream of Doggerland.